Welcome to this evening's full council. Joe, could you read out the emergency evacuation procedure, please?
Thank you. If the continuous alarm sounds, you must evacuate the building and proceed to the assembly point. From this room, you follow the green running person signs to the exit, using either the marble staircase at the end of the building nearest to Bath Abbey or the main staircase. Please do not use the lifts. The assembly point for this building is an orange grove on the green outside Browns. There is an evacuation chair for use by disabled people who so wish in the corridor outside the council chamber public gallery. Alternatively, the area at the top of the marble staircase has been designated as a safe refuge where persons needing assistance should assemble. Thank you.
Sorry, Joe and Chair. It seems very quiet.
Is it?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Because I think I'm speaking quite loudly, but I'll get closer. Do you want me to do it again?
I think we know what to do in an emergency, but...
Sorry, Sarah was quiet while I talk.
Yeah, Sarah was more quiet.
Yeah, they are working on the webcast apparently, so...
Okay, Joe, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, thank you. I've had apologies from councillors Tim Ball, Dave Biddleston, Steve Hedges, George Leach, John Leach, Paul May, Robin Moss and Alison Stretfield-James, and I understand that Jess David will be a little bit late. Thank you. Is there anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you. And have we had any declarations of interest this evening?
I've not received any, but people can indicate now if they have any. No? Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to item 4, minutes from the meeting of the 20th of July. Can I see a proposer for them being a correct record, please? Councillor Jackson, and the seconder. Councillor Hardman.
Right, they're a correct record as far as I could tell. I couldn't even find a split infinitive, so thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Okay, item 5, announcements from the Chair. I have one announcement to make this evening, and that's to pass on the sad news of the recent deaths of 2 former Baines councillors, Jane Tapper, who was a Liberal Democrat councillor for Weston, and Bill Carruthers, who was a Labour councillor for Westfield, both of whom served from 1999 to 2003. I'd like to ask if we could please have a minute's silence for those former councillors. Thank you. Okay, on to item 6. There are no urgent business that's been agreed by myself this evening, so we move on to item 7, which are statements from the public. I'd like to call Chad Allen, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So English Ivy again is back on the subject, and it's still not going away. So we've got buildings, we've got trees, we've got walls, we've got fences, we've also got telegraph poles and lighting poles. which can cause a lot of damage if they come down. Now, does that fall on the council's head, or does it fall on top of the lighting industry and I don't know what electric companies to clear the poles which are overhanging with ivy growing up them, and it could come down and cause a lot of damage, and a lot of people having no electric. So there's one place in Twerton on the High Street, there's a big tree covered by a telegraph pole which is very dangerous. Now if it comes down, what's going to happen? It's going to come down on people's houses, it could cause injuries. If we all chip in and take the ivy off the trees, off the walls, make Bath cleaner and safer, I think the whole system will go a lot smoother. But the council have to admit the fact that they need to start doing something about it before it gets too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any factual questions?
No.
Councillor Harben? No factual questions. Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, no factual questions, thank you.
Councillor
No
White?
factual questions, thank you.
Councillor White?
No, thank you for questions.
Thank you. Move on to our next speaker, Mr. Manning.
Chair, members of council, most of you won't know me, but I was around a long time ago. This petition, which has been circulated to you, if you haven't found it on your email yet, comes from a good cross-section of Foxhill residents. It gives examples where communications can be improved between council departments and between the council and the public it serves. I hesitate to come here to criticise you, because I'm not criticising anybody here in particular, but this is the way things have turned out. I can hardly believe that it's 27 years since I sat in that splendid chair you're in, Chair, and chaired the very last meeting of the old district city council. The district council has a proud history of building hundreds of homes across the city. Members and former members of all parties are due some credit for the excellent standard of maintenance and the neat and well-kept open spaces. Look now at, I'm talking about Foxhill, there may be similar examples elsewhere, but I'm talking about Foxhill. Look now at the rotting fences laden with massively overgrown shrubs, at shabby, unfinished paintwork, at the broken glass and mess left when crews empty the bins around the flats, at the weird reality of installing a new litter bin and not removing the overflowing dog poo bin right next to it. Look at the damage and mess left by Cadbury installers of fibre comm systems. Look at the miserable, apparently out of control grass cutting. I hope that's a passing problem in particular, but I know it's a bit of an issue at the moment. And look at the absence, total absence it seems, of weed killing and road sweeping that used to be part of the normal services. We're aware of Fix My Street and we will use it, but it's a patch and mend arrangement which will not cure the problems of depleted services forced upon you by central government cuts. In the old days, everything that mattered to a council tenant was a matter for the council. Full stop, dead simple. Now it's often unclear who does what. This is from the residents' point of view. It might be clear to you, but it isn't clear to people out there. Councils will always be blamed for things that people are unhappy about. That's human nature, and probably always will be. But nowadays, from a resident's point of view, not with respect to your point of view or your officer's point of view, like it or not, there is an unclear division of responsibility between council and Curo. We are genuinely keen to help you find ways to communicate with us more effectively. We don't want to just complain, we would like to help. We thank our ward councillors for being well engaged in a variety of local issues, but they need your help too. We know you've been shafted by government funding cuts, and we understand it is not possible to go back in time, but please let us help you to make us feel better about our local services.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, any factual questions?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Manning. Would you be willing to meet with myself and more councillors to discuss the issue further?
Be delighted.
Councillor Hardman?
Many thanks, Mr Manning, but no factual questions. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes?
Yes, thank you for your statement, but no factual questions. Thank you.
Councillor Warren?
No, thank you, but thank you for your statement.
Councillor Wright? Any factual questions?
Thank you, Jeff Manning. What are the mental health implications for the lack of quality services for residents who live on QO estates?
Sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing that. I've got hearing aids, but...
What are the mental health implications for the lack of quality services for residents who live on QO estates?
Well, if I've understood your question correctly, the answer is significant. Because people used to be much happier. There are still lots of people in Foxhill who have lived there since their houses were built. And it was a proud and happy community. It still is in many parts, but where there are a lot of vulnerable people and they suffer from crime that goes on around the place occasionally. I think there is a significant point that you're making, if I may say so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robbie Bentley? He's not here. Okay, we'll move on to Gavin Hanbury.
Good evening. I first moved to Bath in 1997 and I've witnessed the increasing number of gulls in the city and also their increasingly aggressive behaviour. I've had a sandwich snatched from my hand drawing blood. I've been hit on the head by a gull whilst walking and I have witnessed a gull take ducklings from the canal. I speak as an individual, but I also represent the Gull Action Group of the Bath Riverside Residents Association, which in itself represents the interests of hundreds of residents. I moved to the Riverside development early last year, but was simply not prepared for the serious impact that these creatures have upon me and many other residents. Similarly to last year, from March through until very recently, I was woken every morning from around 3 a.m. by an extraordinary amount of noise and was unable to get back to sleep. This sustained period of around 4 hours of sleep per night leaves me unable to function properly in a social and professional capacity. With a demanding job and often working from home, it has been impossible to escape the situation and I have had to seek refuge with friends and family. I know from other residents that the collective anxiety of the Riverside community grows as each nesting season approaches and the torture of sleep deprivation begins. I've been dive bombed by gulls on my balcony and have endured large quantities of their waste being deposited onto my property. In small numbers, you might consider these issues to be manageable, so it is important to put them into context. The former home-based site neighbours the Riverside development and, with the building demolished, gulls returned to the same location and nested on the ground. I recently walked past and counted in excess of 40 juvenile gulls. This year, on the roof of the building adjacent to me, at the level of my windows and at a distance of no more than 50 feet, there are often 10 or 12 adult gulls. There are often 4 or 5 on my balcony, 2 on the parapet above me, and 3 or 4 on a second neighbouring building. Given the proximity and the numbers, I leave it to you to consider the consequences. My health and well-being have suffered as a result of lack of sleep, anxiety, and being unable to concentrate with windows open, even in the stifling heat of summer. I have been very grateful for the support of Gordon Dugan, the Council's Gull Officer. He has helped us greatly. I've also contacted Natural England to ask about the protection afforded to gulls, their impact upon human health and the rationale behind a general licensing framework that does not appear to consider local issues and impacts. Their response referred me to general licensing terms and the protection of gulls as species of birds. On repeating my specific questions, I was advised that they would provide no further information and would not respond to further correspondence from me. We are fortunate on the Riverside development to have a supported management company which is, through engagement with Gordon Dugan, to devise a strategy implementing a series of proofing measures on key buildings on the development. However, the issue and impacts extend far beyond these buildings. I note that the Council is reviewing rubbish collections in the city centre and as something within its control this is welcome. However, it does not provide a silver bullet solution. As an individual, I am tired and frustrated and hugely disappointed not to have been heard by the public body that regulates this issue.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, any factual questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. Do you think that local authorities require more powers from central government to deal with this particular issue?
I'm not sure. So my view of it would be that I understand Natural England has the ability to influence the licensing framework. I understand that there could be a requirement for there to be an adjustment in law in order to have different actions taken. But I think for me the key is the engagement with Natural England and getting them to understand the impact that these creatures are having on humans.
Thank you. Councillor Hartman?
Defer to Councillor Johnson.
There's a growing problem with gulls across Bath and North East Somerset, but what extra can the Council do to maintain the level of gulls when the protective status of certain species prevents the use of greater control measures?
Yeah, I think I'd refer to my earlier comments. So I think firstly there's a question over the regulatory approach from Natural England. I understand that they have the ability to influence or adjust their policy within the statutory framework. But I think secondly, there obviously is a consideration in terms of changing the law. I think from the Council specifically, what I would ask for is a collective voice. So I as an individual have contacted them. I've had numerous contacts with them. Gordon Dugan, as I mentioned, has been extremely supportive, but I believe there's a collective message and a collective presentation of the issues.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, any factual questions?
Thank you. Can I defer to Councillor Blair, please?
Thank you. Do you agree that the Council should be engaging more robustly at a senior level to find a solution to this yearly problem? After all, Natural England is protecting all the birds, but who is protecting the residents?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, and per the comments that I've just made, absolutely yes, yeah.
Councillor Warren?
Yeah, thank you. Is there any egg removal taking place? I mean, we used to one time swap the live eggs, if we like, for pretend eggs, to stop them laying anymore, to actually stop. So I just wonder if that's taking place where you are at the moment.
It is, and again, thanks to the guidance and the support of Gordon Dugan. So Gordon has engaged with Natural England on the basis of evidence that I and others provided. He was able to arrange targeted nest removals with Natural England. The challenge from my point of view with that is that the numbers are very limited, and my understanding of the licence framework is that they tend to be at a general level rather than being specific. So, for example, on the development where I live, there were, I think, 3 sweeps on the roof of the building that neighbours mine, but each one of those sweeps had to require a separate licensing approach with Natural England. So rather than saying, this is clearly a problem area, let's conduct nest and egg removals there, we had to go through the process each time. And I should add, to my understanding, those are privately funded exercises, so although they were facilitated by Gordon Dugan, they were funded by the Riverside residents through the management company.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, any factual questions?
Thank you for your statement. Would a Baines Gull portal where residents can register evidence of gull behaviour that impacts public health or safety be useful?
Yes, I think it would. I think that would be very helpful. I would also say that I'm aware that the council has previously posted, and it might still be live actually, something on the website that invites people to report incidents. But I don't believe, from what I've seen and from talking to other residents, that enough people are doing that. So anything to make that easier would certainly be welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement.
Thank you.
And our final speaker for this evening, Matt Cooper.
Good evening. Bath and North East Somerset prides itself on being one of the more forward-thinking councils in the UK, putting climate considerations at the heart of governance. This awareness needs to include every aspect of council activities, including the provision of food. The science is clear that meat and dairy are major contributors to the climate and ecological emergencies. And it has been said that switching to a plant-based diet is the single most effective thing an individual can do to reduce their impact on the planet. The amount of research on this over the years is now vast. However, it's not always easy for individuals to change their diets when they're surrounded by menus that are heavily biased towards meat and dairy options. This council has the opportunity, and I think the duty, to simply prioritise plant-based food options wherever they can, treating the climate emergency with the urgency it requires. In the news last week, more than 650 academics called on British universities to commit to 100% plant-based catering on campuses to fight the climate emergency. Meanwhile, the UK central government is facing a legal challenge regarding its failure to introduce measures to reduce meat and dairy in its food strategy. It is ignoring the insistence of its own advisers that a food system based predominantly on plant-based foods must be the goal and should be the default option in all public sector catering. The South West has a large farming community. Genuinely supporting farmers means looking honestly at the future and recognising where change is necessary. Simply continuing with the status quo is a betrayal. Many other councils around the country have already passed motions which raise awareness of the benefits of eating more plant-based foods and have voted to lead by example by ensuring that all food provided at internal events is plant-based. Even if this only applies to refreshments at a very small number of events per year, it is a small step that sends a powerful message and helps to normalise plant-based eating. In the midst of a climate emergency, supporting a move towards healthy plant-based diets for Bath citizens is a logical and necessary next step. Will councillors meet with me to address any concerns they may have over cost, inclusivity, choice and local impacts of such a direction, and hear how it could be an enormous win for health, sustainability and budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, any factual questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. You've kind of answered my question. Are you willing to meet with Councillor Warren then?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Hartman?
Thank you, Matt. I defer to Councillor Johnson.
Would adopting a fully plant-based diet be counterintuitive to a sustainable diet, as it would ultimately lead to greater levels of deforestation in order to sustain the levels of protein that humans need to survive, whilst also generating higher levels of waste from the byproducts of the human food chain, including mostly vegan diets that are currently used to feed animals?
Well, I would simply refer you to the National Food Strategy and the Committee on Climate Change, both of which indicate that a substantial reduction in meat and dairy options are necessary in order to meet our Paris climate obligations.
Councillor Hughes, any factual questions?
Thank you for your statement, but no factual questions. Thank you.
Councillor Warren?
No factual questions. Thank you.
Councillor Wright?
Thank you for your statement. Which other councils in England have made a commitment to plant-based catering, and what sort of measures does this involve?
So there's currently 12 councils who have taken past motions to move towards plant-based eating, notably Oxfordshire County Council, which is going fully plant-based in all meetings and events, but a number of other large city councils like Leeds and Norwich and Exeter and Oxford City Council as well. And some of the measures are taking a step towards fully plant-based, so having no meat on certain days. Some of them are moving to fully plant-based for internal events and what they call showcasing plant-based at external events. So it's a range of measures.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to propose this report tonight on behalf of Councillor May, who unfortunately can't be with us. I'd like to endorse Paul's comments from Cabinet earlier this month when he thanked Sally Churchyard for her report and for the dedication to youth services in general. The publication of an annual Youth Justice Plan is the Council's duty as lead partner under the Crime and Disorder Act. The plan sets out agreed actions to help prevent offending and reoffending by children aged between 10 and 17 years. It is prepared in consultation with police, probation and health colleagues. It has already been to Cabinet this year and has already been to the PDS panel as well. As you know, Bath and North East Somerset remains an area with comparatively low reported crime rates, and only a small number of children are now supported through the formal youth justice system. However, fear of crime does remain an issue, including concerns about the impact of knife crime in particular. With this in mind, I'd like to welcome the initiative by the PDS colleagues to establish a new task group looking at knife crime prevention. The Youth Justice Service works closely with the Violence Reduction Partnership and now has additional statutory responsibilities not only to prevent youth offending but to collate with others in developing a strategic needs assessment and strategy to address serious crimes. Addressing serious violence is one of the key priorities which informs the plan. Embedding child-first principles is, however, a new priority, but not a new piece of work. This reflects the Youth Justice Board's strategic approach and central guiding principles. I personally think this priority is worth focusing on for a few moments of the Council's time. The Youth Justice Service works with some of the most vulnerable children living in our area and is committed to treating them as children regardless of their behaviour. Since last year, it has renamed itself to reflect a commitment to child-first justice. This takes into account exploitation, trauma and other poor childhood experiences that have led them to these life choices. The service continues to participate in a pan-authority trauma recovery approach to working with children in the greatest risk of offending. The first part of an external evaluation indicates that there is positive benefits to this way of working. As always, a key part of this work is seeking and responding to the voice of the child themselves. I draw colleagues' attention to the performance section of this plan, which shows a very low number of children coming into the justice system for the first time this year and no custodial sentences in the last year. Although the reoffending rate continues to be a challenge, this is linked to specific factors about a very small cohort of children. In 2023 and 2024, 10 new performance indicators have also been introduced. This is, as you will all appreciate, a vital piece of statutory work that the Council performs, and I move recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 as printed, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harden?
I'm very pleased to second this report. As Councillor Guy has just said, this Youth Justice Plan is a statutory plan which we have to produce annually. The Council is the lead partner of a multi-agency team drawing up this plan, along with police, social services, education and probation. You might like to know, especially if you've read the report, that Baines Council is actually the biggest financial contributor to the Youth Justice Plan, but there is in-kind support along with a national grant from the Ministry of Justice. The Youth Justice Plan fulfills the requirements of the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 and, if approved, would now be submitted to the Youth Justice Board for England and Wales as required. As Councillor Guy has mentioned, the youth justice priorities for the year are to reduce the number of children in the youth justice system, reduce offending, improve the safety and well-being of children in the youth justice system, and improve outcomes for children in the youth justice system. So how well are we doing? Well, we've already heard about the effectiveness of our youth justice system, especially about reoffending. Our cohort in Baines includes 18 children, 6 of whom reoffended. These are low numbers, but it does show a very small increase from the previous year. Another indicator is the number of first-time entrants into the youth justice system. This too has remained the same, which is quite a low number at 14. Very importantly, and I think it's worth reiterating again, although it's been said, there were no custodial sentences in this period. However, as with last year, there was a disproportionality in some of the figures. There's overrepresentation of two groups, young people with special needs and young people of mixed ethnic heritage. The development plan, I think this is very important, shows how this disproportionality will be addressed as a continuing priority. The development plan shows clearly what actions are planned to reduce these numbers. This is a very thorough and detailed justice plan for us to approve, and I am pleased to have the opportunity, like Councillor Guy has said, to thank the officers involved in drawing up this youth justice plan for us, particularly to thank Sally Churchyard, who is now going to retire, who's drawn up this report, and who has given many, many excellent years of service to Baines. So on your behalf, I'd like to thank her for many years of outstanding service. Many thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Romero?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a few quick comments from myself as Chair of the Children and Young People and Adults Wellbeing and Health PDS panel, that this paper came before us earlier this week on Monday, and also to endorse the comments that have just been made. But the first point I would like to make, which was also made at that meeting, is that this paper in future comes to scrutiny before it goes to Cabinet, since it isn't possible to add much that is meaningful if it has already been agreed by the Executive. I'm not asking at this point for any additional recommendations, just that this wish is taken into account. This is a good report and is very thorough, as Councillor Hardman has already stated, and this may indeed cloud the fact that there are few children and young people in the local justice system. However, these few come from the same groups, and this has been highlighted in previous annual reports, and the panel would like to see this position improved, and at the meeting made several points to this effect. As a panel, we welcome the linkage between the work of the Violence Reduction Strategy, and this will be a key part of our work on knife violence. We will be seeking input from the council group as a whole, so you should, as councillors, expect an invitation to that effect shortly, if you haven't already done so. I would finally like to echo Councillor Hardman and Councillor Guy's thank yous to Sally Churchyard, who has given years of sterling service to this council in this area. So, thank you.
Thank you. I've not seen anybody else indicate they want to speak. Therefore, Councillor Guys wants to come up.
Happy to move to the vote, Chair.
Thank you. We move to the vote. All those in favour? Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to item 9, the Corporate Audit Committee Annual Report and Terms of Reference. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin by clarifying that I'm not proposing this report in my current role as Cabinet Member for Resources, but rather because the current Chair of the Audit Committee is unable to attend today, and I was Chair of the Audit Committee during the period covered by the report, which is why I'm delivering it. As a committee with specific powers delegated from full council, the Corporate Audit Committee is required to report back to full council annually on its activity. The report is a summary of the work carried out by the committee during the 2022-23 year and is the 18th report to council since the committee was created. The report's available to everyone to read, so I won't rehearse its contents in detail. The main issue I'd like to highlight, as I did last year in fact, is the systemic failure of the external audit system. The Council experiences this as repeated delays in the external auditor finishing their work auditing our accounts. This has a serious detrimental effect on our officers' ability to plan and to undertake their own work in a timely fashion, because they're having to deal with the demands on them from the external auditors well outside any planned timetable. It also means that the information is presented to the Audit Committee long after it's due, which significantly reduces the effectiveness of the Audit Committee in performing its role. The Section 151 officer and I wrote formally to the auditors, Grant Thornton, to express our deep concern at the situation in mid-March this year. They eventually completed their audit of the 21-22 accounts in late March 23, nearly a whole year after the financial year end. And the value for money report had not been delivered by the end of the financial year. I don't believe it has been delivered, and I think that Grant Thornton are now planning to combine the 21-22 and 22-23 value for money reports into a single report this year in order to try and catch up. This is obviously far from satisfactory. We have received assurances from Grant Thornton that we won't experience the same problems this year, and we will see whether those assurances are matched by delivery over the course of the next few months. Despite all that, I'm pleased to report that when the external auditor did eventually report, they gave the Council a completely clean bill of health with an unqualified opinion. And I'd like to express my very great thanks to the officers for their work in achieving that and for the production of the report. I'm satisfied that the work of the committee fulfils the roles set out in the terms of reference, and I should note that there are a couple of very small amendments to the terms of reference for the committee which Council are being asked to approve. Finally, I'd like to thank long-standing members of the committee, Andy Furse and Brian Simmons, both of whom left the Council in May and who both, amongst many other Council activities over the years, gave, I think, 20 years of loyal service to the Audit Committee. I move the item as detailed in sections 2.1 and 2.2 of the report.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second the recommendation under 2.1 to note the work of the Corporate Audit Committee as set out in the annual report in Appendix 1, and under 2.2 to approve the revised terms of reference as set out in Appendix 2. As the only returning member of the Corporate Audit Committee from the previous term, I can confirm and recommend that there is much interest to be had in perusal of the detailed papers which come before us, to ensure the important annual governance role, treasury management function and review of the Council's and also Aqueous Group's annual accounts. During the past year, there was something of a Groundhog Day feel about the work undertaken by the committee in interrogating and seeking to understand a series of delays in the external auditor's work on the 2021-22 accounts. These were, with a concerted effort from officers and the Chair and a sprint to the finish, finally signed off very late in March 23. We also received the more illuminating value for money report on the Council's arrangements for the previous year, that is 2020-2021. A number of useful recommendations were made, many of which are underway, and no risks of significant weakness were identified. As Councillor Elliott has mentioned, the current committee still faces the challenge of eliciting the 21-22 and 22-23 VFM report. On a more positive note, we've received regular updates on the Council's internal audit work, a vital component of the Council's governance system, including work on COVID-19 small business grants and tenancy fraud. This committee does very important work, even if not centre stage, ensuring that the engine room underpinning the Council's activities is sound, and I join Councillor Elliott in thanking everyone involved. In particular, the officer teams who support us through the process, for all their advice, for providing detailed papers and ensuring the smooth running of the committees. Also thanks to independent committee member John Barker for contributing his professional expertise to our discussions. With these thoughts, Chair, I second the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hartman?
Whilst the Council's financial position remains very challenging, we do have a robust internal audit system, even if the external audit system doesn't quite match up. We believe, having read the report and having heard what's been said, that great work has been done by officers in these very, very difficult times. I believe we're not in the same category as the 14 or so councils which have been declared bankrupt. But can we be reassured there's little likelihood or no likelihood that we will be in this similar position, particularly as I think we all know all councils are facing financial constraints, except of course for the City of London.
Thank you. I've not seen anybody else indicate they wish to speak. Councillor Elliott, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I will simply sum up by giving Councillor Hardman the assurance that she requires. We are not in that position, and we are an extremely well-managed and well-run council financially, so I'm very happy to make that reassurance.
Thank you. I'd like to move to the vote. All those in favour?
I think that's unanimous.
Thank you. On to item 10, Policy Development and Scrutiny Annual Report for 22-23. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to move this report. It summarises the key work of our 3 PDS panels over the last year of the previous Council, 2022-23, and it also begins to look forward at future opportunities for both scrutiny and policy development. As former Vice Chair of the Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing panel, I can speak first-hand at the importance that policy development and scrutiny has in ensuring we have good governance within our Council. And it also provides a key forum for the public to get involved in decision-making. As you can see from the report, our scrutiny members were extremely busy over the last 12 months. In health and care, we have seen the formal launch of the integrated care system. In transport, we considered the challenges around bus provision, and we continue to play a key role in an annual budget cycle. I would like to thank the leader and his executive team for continuing to support scrutiny. I feel we've tried and succeeded to be a critical friend to Cabinet. I would like to acknowledge all the members who were involved in the PDS panels last year, and I'd especially like to recognise the contributions of Councillors Karen Warrington and Winston Duguid in Corporate Panel, Councillor Vic Pritchard for Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing, and Councillors Karen Walker and Councillor Hurst for their work on the Climate Emergency and Sustainability Panel, and of course all of the officers who support scrutiny in Baines. With the pressures currently facing local government, good, transparent governance is key to helping us navigate through these difficulties. And I look forward to hopefully seeing more policy development through the panels in the coming year. With that in mind, I'm delighted to move the report.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge? Yes, thank you, Chair. As both a current and previous member of the Corporate Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel, I'd like to second the recommendation in 2.1 in which Council have asked to note the contents of the PDS Annual Report for 22-23. Scrutiny work carried out by our three panels is vital to provide a constructive check and balance on the administration of the day. Committee members work hard to digest the comprehensive and interesting reports provided by officers and raise important questions on service delivery and policy, a vital role holding Cabinet to account on behalf of our residents. Topics discussed are wide-ranging and cover all areas of council activity, from budget proposals to renewable energy and suicide prevention. I'd like to thank officers who have presented to our panels and responded to our questioning for their time and hard work in preparation, patient responses and good humour under fire. I'd also like to emphasise the efforts made to ensure transparency in the scrutiny process. Meetings are open to the public to attend, allow for public statements and are broadcast live. It is truly a member-led process in terms of shaping the agenda content. Finally, looking forward, goals include more emphasis on the rewarding process of policy development and use of new approaches such as task groups and inquiries. With these thoughts, Chair, I'd like to second the recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
I welcome this report. However, if we are to have effective scrutiny, then councillors need to be provided with adequate and detailed information for the items on their agendas. Recently, I was at a PDS panel meeting where the only information we were given prior to the meeting was a brief PowerPoint presentation. This was an agenda that included flagship policy areas such as low traffic neighbourhoods, and yet there was no further information, not for us as councillors and not for the public. There is no use or effectiveness in scrutinising hot air. We need transparent, detailed reporting that shows the direction of this council and allows our residents to have faith and involvement in the democratic processes of this council.
Thank you. Councillor Hartman.
As a Labour Group generally, I would say we do support this annual report on policy development and scrutiny activity. We particularly support Section 4, looking forward to more policy development, as shown recently in my PDS panel and what's already been mentioned by Councillor O'Doherty. And of course, I think our seconder, Councillor... Sorry, thank you. In which we are reviewing knife crime prevention across BAMES with the use of a task and finish group, and I think this is a really good policy development that's taking place. However, in Section 1, it does say meetings have actively given local people a greater voice, and I would question how well this is actually being done across BAMES for some of our PDS panels, and I would ask the question, how can we get more people, more of our local residents involved in our PDS scrutiny panels?
Thank you. Councillor Helgers.
Thank you for this report. Thank you, Chair. It is great to see the positive work that was undertaken by the BDS panels last year. Looking forward, like Councillor Johnson, I would like to reiterate that for effective and constructive scrutiny panel meetings, papers need to be provided to members of PDS panels in advance of the meetings. Members need to be able to look at papers beforehand in order to ask meaningful questions to the executive and officers. Thank you.
Thank you. I've not seen anybody else indicate they wish. Councillor Jackson.
I would just like to underline what Councillor Johnson has just said about lack of information, which I have found made it difficult for me to decide whether I should turn up to a scrutiny panel or not, and I missed the item on the bus service, which I regret. Equally, he's right, because it's very difficult to explain to a member of the public why it would be a good idea for them to go to a scrutiny panel and what the scrutiny panel could do to examine a question as vital for us as rural community subsidised bus services. And I really wonder if we've had a proper look at procedure concerning the timetabling of these panels, because I'm not convinced that the equalities side of things is always regarded. For example, a panel at 9 a.m. in the morning on a Monday is not a very good time for the ordinary person with a normal 9 to 5 job. So I hope that in the coming year the scrutiny panels will look a bit more closely about how to engage with the public and set up a more effective dialogue. But the other body that I'm involved in, the Local Development Forum, is of course not a scrutiny panel really, but the members scrutinise what the officers are doing on the development of the local plan and planning policy. And I know the officers are working very hard and that they're under-resourced, but nevertheless, to be required to be given less than a week to get a response back from our respective groups to the forum about what we think about the local plan sites and principles coming forward is really an impossibility. So if officers could bear that in mind and give us plan a little bit more long term and get the information out, as Councillor Johnson says, a bit more efficaciously, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got nobody else wanting to speak. Councillor Doherty wants to sum up.
I agree with a lot of the points that have been made here, and I think that it warrants a further discussion. I think we should look at how scrutiny works in Baines and perhaps do things a little differently. Perhaps in the future, I know that we're looking at that in the panel that I'm on, the Children, Adults, Health and Wellbeing panel, with the Task and Finish group that Councillor Hardman mentioned earlier. So I think that, and I agree with your point, Councillor Jackson, about accessibility of the panels. As someone who has a full-time job, they're not always easy to go along to. It is helpful that they're broadcast, of course, but that's not, if you want to have an active part in it as a member of the public, that's not necessarily the best way. So I think, while the scrutiny panels do fantastic work, I do think that it does warrant, a discussion about how scrutiny might look in the future. And I know I've had that discussion with the leader in the past, so it would be good to continue those discussions, and if anybody has any further input, I'm sure it would be welcomed. But I think we should move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on to the vote. All those in favour?
That will be 48.
Yep. Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Items 11 and 12 have actually both been withdrawn from this evening's meeting, so we move on to item 13, which is a motion from the Liberal Democrat Group on staff safety. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this motion is to highlight and support the new violence, aggression, threatening and challenging behaviour staff safety policy, which was newly updated this year. We would also like to show our support for the campaign to raise awareness of the unacceptable behaviour Bath and North East Somerset Council workers frequently have to face by a minority of the public. You've probably seen the posters shared on the Council's social media accounts indicating a day in the life of someone working in the Council. The posters highlight a list of really strong achievements helping people in various divisions of the Council. However, they also indicate examples of behaviour for a very small minority of the public, which are unacceptable. Verbal and physical abuse no one should ever have to fear. Councils are often something people take for granted, and the people within them even more so. If you were to look up a list of services offered by this local council online, you'd be presented with a list of 421 items under an A to Z that we manage and all support. There's an amazing team of individuals who work tirelessly for the council to support these services and achieve its aims regardless of political leaning, all working toward improving people's lives. Ultimately, that is what it's all about, working for the people who live in the capture area and that we have the services needed to have a happy and hopefully fulfilling life. We're all human, and in this age of incredible technology and globalisation, we're used to having things happening instantly, whether it's having your shopping delivered yesterday, your holiday for next week booked within minutes or at a reduced rate, or indeed, something being dealt with on your doorstep within a few moments of it being reported. How often do we stop to think about the processes involved in making something happen for us? How often do we think about the individual who needs to make that happen? Our patience should not end with the council team who are working so tirelessly to support us. One thing our council team shouldn't ever have to consider is whether they will be safe at work. They shouldn't have to live in fear of being threatened with written, verbal or physical violence in their day-to-day jobs, making an honest living. This past year alone, we've had an unacceptable, incredibly disturbing reports of such abuse. Real-life examples include people within our council being driven at, a female colleague followed back to her workplace and threatened with physical violence, and another member of staff threatened with a hammer. Some council staff also have reported being sworn and shouted at, being trolled on social media, and receiving persistent, aggressive calls, visits or emails. This is disgraceful and cannot be tolerated. How is this an acceptable way for us to work or expect others to work or earn a living? How can we expect to recruit and retain individuals where they will fear this can happen to them? I must say that the vast majority of people do treat the council team with respect and truly do value the energy, effort, time and expertise that is put toward improving people's lives. The team meet or encounter individuals who believe they are right in being violent, aggressive or threatening is appalling, and none of our staff should ever have to experience this as part of their job. We work to live, we do not live to work. Life is short and the best is brought out in all of us when we love what we do. Wouldn't it be best to ensure that the work you do is something you really enjoy and quite frankly don't fear? Working for the council, supporting people, is a really rewarding job. We wouldn't be here as elected councillors if we didn't believe that. In conclusion, I would like to quote our council leader, Kevin Guy. As an employer, we are committed to providing and maintaining a safe working environment and safe systems of work for all staff, which includes contractors and volunteers. We are taking a zero-tolerance approach towards unacceptable behaviour, and the aim of the policy and campaign is to provide information to stop, control and respond to customers who are behaving in violent, aggressive, threatening or challenging manner. We all deserve to be safe at work and to be treated with respect.
Thank you. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. We're very happy to second this motion. Our staff work extremely hard for us and our residents, and the very least we can do is make sure that they're safe. A lot of our staff work on the front lines, so could be at risk, so we are especially in need to make sure that they have a safe working environment. We're very pleased to second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hardman?
Obviously, the Labour Group will be supporting this motion, but I would like to ask a few questions of Councillor Kelly, if I may. For example, what potential outcomes would you expect to have because of this motion? And also, what consultations were made between staff, for example, and trade unions, if any? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of what I think should be a result of this campaign, I think it's about awareness and making sure that people understand that the staff cannot be treated in that way. The campaign that went out with the posters was effective, but I think that we really need to reiterate it among the public that this behaviour cannot be tolerated. In regards to your other question, I would have to review that and get back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson and Councillor Dando.
She called you first, Anna, so you go first. She called you first, so you go first.
Right. Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Dando. I was wondering, I'm afraid I didn't have time to look up this policy before the council meeting. Violence, aggression, threatening and challenging behaviour. But I was thinking that perhaps we ought also, in this Me Too generation, consider the protection of our staff and our councillors, who often work quite hard alongside them, from sexual harassment and inappropriate behaviour. Is that going to come under violence, or how would we rate that, or should this motion not have a separate clause covering the Russell Brand situation?
Thank you. Councillor Dando?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I wasn't proposing to make a formal amendment to this because I think it would be helpful for this to maybe go to a PDS panel at some point in time to see how it's working. But I think it would be helpful, as the leader's been quoted expressing how supportive the council is about this, if we brought a report back on an annual basis on how this is working, because I think that would demonstrate that we as a council were genuinely committed to addressing these issues.
Very good idea. Councillor Guy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A very good point just made. I'm happy to look into that. That's worth doing. Always happy to look at KPIs, etc. The point that Alan has made, Councillor Jackson, that is covered in our Code of Conduct behaviours with regards to protecting staff from sexual harassment. So it is always covered in different legislation, not in this particular one.
Okay, I haven't seen anybody else that wishes to speak on this item. Councillor Kelly, do you want to sum up?
I'd like to thank my colleagues for their attention to this, and hopefully we can all support the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the vote. All those in favour?
I think that's unanimous.
Thank you. On to item 14, which is questions and statements from councillors. I'd like you all to look at the questions that have already been circulated with the responses, and we have one further statement from Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Council, in the Chew Valley, timetable bus services have been replaced by Westlink demand responsive transport. But Westlink is failing in the Chew Valley, despite all the excellent work done by our active early adopters group. It is failing, and predictably so, because it is not reliable. It does not have regularity at certain times, nor has a regular spine service to attach to it. My ward colleague, Councillor Box, and I have heard numerous heartbreaking stories of people becoming increasingly isolated, of living in fear of losing their job, of struggling to get to vital appointments, and of vulnerable elderly people being abandoned for hours. We recently attended a local consultation in Bishop Sutton billed as a listening event on rural buses hosted by the Weka Mayor. Every resident we have spoken to came away from that meeting feeling disappointed that they had not been listened to, and that the social value of rural buses was not recognised. At this meeting, the Mayor said that he could not use any of his £57.7 million bus service improvement plan allocations on existing services. Yet in late May, the Department of Transport changed its rules to allow BSIP money to be used to fund existing services. And notably, since May, Transport for West Midlands has reallocated around £40 million of its BSIP settlement for exactly this purpose. Meanwhile here, public money awarded for some rural services has not been spent on those services. £4 million has been spent by the Mayor on transport rebranding, and £8 million has been allocated by the Mayor to a birthday free tickets bonanza for those who already have a bus service. After consulting other North East Somerset councillors, Member Advocate for Rural Communities, Councillor Gourley, has drafted a petition for residents to sign, simply asking Mr Norris to restore reliable public transport in North East Somerset. I'm asking Council one thing, to please support this non-party political petition.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, do you have any factual questions? Councillor Harding, any factual questions?
No factual questions, thank you.
Councillor Hughes?
No factual questions, thank you.
Councillor Warren?
No, thank you.
Councillor Wright?
Thank you for your statement. Will you be signing the Take the West of England Buses into Public Control petition, which 2,360 people have signed so far?
I haven't seen it, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Can I defer my question to Councillor Gourley, please? Thank you.
Good evening. Do you think it's appropriate or inappropriate for the Weka Mayor to spend £8 million on free birthday bus tickets for those who already have buses and £4 million on cosmetic branding when entire communities in North East Somerset have lost their buses?
I I would refer people to a National Centre for Social Research paper published in 2020, prepared for the Department of Transport, entitled Impact of Interventions Encouraging a Switch from Cars to More Sustainable Modes of Transport. In it, it says, interventions that used temporary financial or other rewards as an attempt to encourage people to adopt active travel had little effect in doing so once rewards ended. So personally, as a scientist and a medic who looks towards evidence for interventions, I find it, shall we say, frustrating that the spending of £8 million is at the whim of one man and his dog that could actually be used to support our rural buses.
Thank you. Okay, that brings this evening's meeting to a close. Sorry, Councillor Jackson, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to ask a quick question, Chair, of Councillor Harding, whether he had seen the petition which 600 residents signed and it was presented to Council by Mrs Harrington in May, and whether he'd had seen my statement on how to address the situation and secure funding for the service.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Yes, I was at council meeting when the lady presented a petition. I have seen it. I don't think I've seen your solution, and I'd be very happy to read it if you send it to me.
Thank you. Brings the meeting to a close.